I will also share my screen so we can start reading. All right. We are, A Course in Miracles, Chapter 7, Section 4, Healing as the Recognition of Truth. Truth can only be recognized and need only be recognized. Inspiration is of the Holy Spirit, and certainty is of God, according to his laws. Both, therefore, come from the same source, since inspiration comes from the voice for God, and certainty comes from the laws of God. Healing does not come directly from God, who knows his creations as perfectly whole. Yet, healing is still of God, because it proceeds from his voice and from his laws. It is their result in a state of mind that does not know him. The state is unknown to him and therefore does not exist. But those who sleep are unaware. Because they are unaware, they do not know. The Holy Spirit must work through you to teach you he is in you. This is an intermediary step toward the knowledge that you are in God because you are part of him. The miracles the Holy Spirit inspires can have no order of difficulty because every part of creation is of one order. This is God's will and yours. The laws of God establish this, and the Holy Spirit reminds you of it. When you heal, you're remembering the laws of God and forgetting the laws of the ego. I said before that forgetting is merely a way of remembering better. It is therefore not the opposite of remembering when it is properly perceived. Perceived improperly, it induces a perception of conflict with something else, as all incorrect perception does. Properly perceived, it can be used as a way out of conflict, as all proper perception can. The ego does not want to teach everyone all it has learned, because that would defeat its purpose. Therefore, it does not really learn at all. The Holy Spirit teaches you to use what the ego has made to teach the opposite of what the ego has learned. The kind of learning is as irrelevant as is the particular ability that it was applied to the learning. All you need do is make the effort to learn, for the Holy Spirit has a unified goal for the effort. If different abilities are applied long enough to one goal, the abilities themselves become unified. This is because they are channelized in one direction or in one way. Ultimately, then, they all contribute to one result, and by doing so, their similarity, rather than their differences, is emphasized. All abilities should therefore be given over to the Holy Spirit, who understands how to use them properly. He uses them only for healing, because he knows you only as whole. By healing, you learn of wholeness, and by learning of wholeness, you learn to remember God. You have forgotten him, but the Holy Spirit understands that your forgetting must be translated into a way of remembering. The ego's goal is as unified as the Holy Spirit's. And it is because of this that their goals can never be reconciled in any way or to any extent. The ego always seeks to divide and separate. The Holy Spirit always seeks to unify and heal. As you heal, you are healed because the Holy Spirit sees no order of difficulty in healing. Healing is the way to undo the belief in differences, being the only way of perceiving the sonship as one. This perception is therefore in accord with the laws of God, even in a state of mind that is out of accord with his. The strength of right perception is so great that it brings the mind into accord with his, because it serves his voice, which is in all of you. To think you can oppose the will of God is a real delusion. The ego believes that it can, and that it can offer you its own will as a gift. You do not want it. It is not a gift. It is nothing at all. God has given you a gift that you both have and are. When you do not use it, you forget that you have it. By not remembering it, you do not know what you are. Healing, then, is a way of approaching knowledge by thinking in accordance with the laws of God and recognizing their universality. Without this recognition, you've made the laws meaningless to you. Yet the laws are not meaningless, since all meaning is contained by them and in them. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, because that is where the laws of God operate truly, and they can operate only truly because they are the laws of truth. But seek this only because you can find nothing else. There is nothing else. God is all in a very literal sense. All being is in him who is all being. You are therefore in him, since your being is his. Healing is a way of forgetting the sense of danger the ego has induced in you by not recognizing its existence in your brother. This strengthens the Holy Spirit in both of you, because it is a refusal to acknowledge fear. Love needs only this invitation. It comes freely to all the sonship, being what the sonship is. By your awakening to it, you're merely forgetting what you are not. This enables you to remember what you are. Great reminder. I say hi to Cynthia, hi to Kuzume. We were talking earlier, I said, I had read something somewhere, probably Course in Miracles, I can't remember now, that said anytime you feel upset for any reason, or angry or frustrated or judgmental, it's because you've forgotten to love yourself. You've forgotten who you are. And it just kind of explained that right here in what we read. You've forgotten your greatness, right? Because if you remembered, nothing would ever upset you. Nobody could ever upset you, because you would never feel attacked. You'd never feel that fear, because you would only know yourself as love. And I was just saying how, sometimes I'll be driving in a car with my husband and he'll be angry or something and he'll be yelling at somebody on the road, and I'll be like, oh, why does he have to drive like this? And then of course I get like all bubbled up inside, like, oh, I can't stand driving with him, and then I have to remember, like, what am I afraid of? Why is this fear overtaking my emotions right now and creating a judgment against him for what he's doing, which has nothing to do with me, right? So it's that moment where I forgot to love myself enough, where I allowed my fear to take it, where I forgot who I was, right? So just all these little lessons, all these little opportunities to learn, right? That we have all the time.
That comes up for me too, that same situation you're talking about in the car. And I try to look at it, and it's the fear of death.
Yeah. I think it's the fear of death, but also I think sometimes in me, it's not so much I am afraid because he's not driving safely, in my opinion, but it's more so that I want him to be more peaceful. I want him to be more like me, right? I don't want my environment to be in a place of unease or dis-ease, right? I want to control my environment so my environment can support my happiness. And in a weird kind of a sense, it's like, okay, I can do that all by myself just by choosing to love myself more in this moment. Yeah. I'm
Right.
sorry. You're going to pipe in there?
Well, yeah, it was just, and then you got to the word control, kind of. You wanted to control your environment, which also meant you were, trying to control another's experiences. So when you go to your space of peace, if you will, you're then acknowledging that, you're the source of your own agitation. He may not truly be in dis-ease because he thinks of it as his natural state at this point.
Yeah.
So his consciousness is right with himself until the day that it's not.
Right.
But it's not right with you, therefore you're the one placing the judgment and need to, tend your own garden and find your own peace. So you do that.
That's
and then it's all, and then that's the value in the lesson. That's the value of him being, shall we say, not at peace, because it helps you remember to go back to your state as you're coming out of it. It's like, what do I value? Oh, I value the peace. Yeah, okay, I'm going back there.
Yeah.
So then he becomes your teacher and has a value.
100%. 100%. And I was experiencing that in our car ride the other day. So I was like, okay, I can do this. I can maintain this place of peace, and I can be in accord with that mind of God, regardless of what's going on around me. So
it's very interesting listening to you talking about this. And we know that, you have a good marriage, Terry, but it does remind us of when we were with an abusive partner, and we did that. I mean, he was our greatest teacher by far. And we had like the most profound spiritual experiences, mostly when we were with him, because we had to sit and meditate for like 2 hours a day before we got home from work, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to cope with what was coming. And yeah, I mean, learning to look at ourselves and not learning that we cannot change another human being, learning that in fact trying to change another human being is probably the easiest path to misery that we can find. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's all. I mean, I left him, obviously, and I'm glad I did, but it's like the lesson from that is not that, oh, he was a bad person and I had to leave him. It was that I learned what I needed to from him. And absolutely. I don't need to learn those lessons anymore. I'm learning different lessons with different people in my life and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And yeah, I had a not similar experience as you, but I was with an abusive partner for many years, and a lot of really, really profound, valuable lessons came out of that. And, and I am still learning, as I described, with new partners, but it's just similar lessons, just similar but different. And each time you grow and become more aware of who you are and more aligned with that place of love within yourself. And yeah, it's interesting. All of our brothers, right? All of our brothers. And that's what we just read. All of our brothers are part of the one mind of God, are a part of us. Right?
And we've also learned from experience that when we don't need the lesson anymore, their behavior changes. And that's incredible, as we've talked about before. Yeah. It's not them. It's not. The universe is just putting it all on for us. We don't know how it works, but that is the experience.
It is so true. Go ahead, Mary.
as I said, I agree with both of you, with each of you on that. Because when I finally learned all those lessons myself, and I was in a few abusive relationships in different ways, again, the different clothing that the character put on to, show me that I was still stuck in. And when I finally declared, no, I'm done with this, I was done. The universe didn't send me anymore. It was a fascinating reality that I still didn't fully see the depth of it for another probably 30 years. I saw it in terms of that lesson, but I didn't see how much I, had contribute to my entire reality for probably another 30 years. And then I just declared I was done with all of that drama, period, end of story. So I don't live in a world of drama anymore, even though it happens all around me. I just don't engage in it. I don't take it on. It's like kind of like a thought that just goes by, and I let it float down the river. Yeah. So all this drama happens, and I kind of watch it and smile and say, these are their lessons. And when they're ready to declare they're done with the drama, then it won't be appearing in their movie.
Right. Yes, yes, yes. All right. Any more conversations around that? Or anything else that came up for anyone while reading this? All right, let's keep going then. Healing and the changelessness of mind. The body is nothing more than a framework for developing abilities, which is quite apart from what they are used for. That is a decision. The effects of the ego's decision in this matter are so apparent that they need no elaboration. But the Holy Spirit's decision to use the body only for communication has such a direct connection with healing that it does need clarification. The unhealed healer obviously does not understand his own vocation. Only minds communicate. Since the ego cannot obliterate the impulse to communicate because it is also the impulse to create, it can only teach you that the body can both communicate and create, and therefore does not need the mind. The ego thus tries to teach you that the body can act like the mind and is therefore self-sufficient. Yet we have learned that behavior is not the level for either teaching or learning, since you can act in accordance with what you do not believe. To do this, however, will weaken you as a teacher and a learner, because, as has been repeatedly emphasized, you teach what you do believe. An inconsistent lesson will be poorly taught and poorly learned. If you teach both sickness and healing, you are both a poor teacher and a poor learner. Healing is the one ability everyone can develop and must develop if he is to be healed. Healing is the Holy Spirit's form of communication in this world, and the only one he accepts. He recognizes no other, because he does not accept the ego's confusion of mind and body. Minds can communicate, but they cannot hurt. The body, in the service of the ego, can hurt other bodies, but this cannot occur unless the body has already been confused with the mind. This situation, too, can be used either for healing or for magic. But you must remember that magic always involves the belief that healing is harmful. This belief is its totally insane premise, and so it proceeds accordingly. Healing only strengthens. Magic always tries to weaken. Healing perceives nothing in the healer that everyone else does not share with him. Magic always sees something special in the healer, which he believes can offer as a gift to someone who does not have it. He may believe that the gift comes from God to him, but it is quite evident that he does not understand God if he thinks he has something that others lack. The Holy Spirit does not work by chance, and healing that is of him always works. Unless the healer always heals by him, the results will vary. Yet healing itself is consistent, since only consistency is conflict-free, and only the conflict-free are whole. By accepting exceptions and acknowledging that he can sometimes heal and sometimes not, the healer is obviously accepting inconsistency. He is therefore in conflict and is teaching conflict. Can anything of God not be for all and for always? Love is incapable of any exceptions. Only if there is fear does the idea of exceptions seem to be meaningful. Exceptions are fearful because they are made by fear. The fearful healer is a contradiction in terms and is therefore a concept that only a conflicted mind could possibly perceive as meaningful. Fear does not gladden, healing does. Fear always makes exceptions, healing never does. Fear produces dissociation because it induces separation. Healing always produces harmony because it proceeds from integration. It is predictable because it can be counted on. Everything that is of God can be counted on because everything of God is wholly real. Healing can be counted on because it is inspired by his voice and is in accord with his laws. Yet, if healing is consistent, it cannot be inconsistently understood. Understanding means consistency, because God means consistency. Since that is his meaning, it is also yours. Your meaning cannot be out of accord with his, because your whole meaning and your only meaning comes from his and is like his. God cannot be out of accord with himself, and you cannot be out of accord with him. You cannot separate yourself from your Creator, who created you by sharing his being with you. The unhealed healer wants gratitude from his brothers, but he is not grateful to them. That is because he thinks he's giving something to them and is not receiving something equally desirable in return. His teaching is limited because he is learning so little. His healing lesson is limited by his own ingratitude, which is a lesson in sickness. True learning is constant and so vital in its power for change that a son of God can recognize his power in one instant and change the world in the next. That is because by changing his mind, he has changed the most powerful device that was ever given him for change. This in no way contradicts the changelessness of mind as God created it. But you think that you have changed it as long as you learn through the ego. This places you in a position of needing to learn a lesson that seems contradictory. You must learn to change your mind about your mind. Only by this can you learn that it is changeless. When you heal, that is exactly what you are learning. You are recognizing the changeless mind in your brother by realizing that he could not have changed his mind. That is how you perceive the Holy Spirit in him. It is only the Holy Spirit in him that never changes his mind. He himself may think he can, or he would not perceive himself as sick. He therefore does not know what his self is. If you see only the changeless in him, you've not really changed him. By changing your mind about his for him, you help him undo the change his ego thinks it has made in him. As you can hear two voices, so you can see in two ways. One way shows you an image or an idol that you may worship out of fear, but will never love. The other shows you only truth, which you will love because you will understand it. Understanding is appreciation, because what you understand, you can identify with. And by making it part of you, you've accepted it with love. That is how God himself created you, in understanding, in appreciation, and in love. The ego is totally unable to understand this because it does not understand what it makes, does not appreciate it, and does not love it. It incorporates to take away. It literally believes that every time it deprives someone of something, it is increased. I have spoken often of the increase of the kingdom by your creations, which can only be created as you were. The whole glory and perfect joy that is the kingdom lies in you to give. Do you not want to give it? You cannot forget the Father because I am with you, and I cannot forget him. To forget me is to forget yourself and him who created you. Our brothers are forgetful. That is why they need your remembrance of me and of him who created me. Through this remembrance, you can change their minds about themselves, as I can change yours. Your mind is so powerful a light that you can look into theirs and enlighten them, as I can enlighten yours. I do not want to share my body in communion because this is to share nothing. Would I try to share an illusion with the most holy children of a most holy Father? Yet I do want to share my mind with you because we are of one mind, and that mind is ours. See only this mind everywhere, because only this is everywhere and in everything. It is everything because it encompasses all things within itself. Blessed are you who perceive only this, because you perceive only what is true. Come, therefore, unto me, and learn of the truth in you. The mind we share is shared by all our brothers, and as we see them truly, they will be healed. Let your mind shine with mine upon their minds, and by our gratitude to them, make them aware of the light in them. This light will shine back upon you and on the whole sonship, because this is your proper gift to God. He will accept it and give it to the sonship, because it is acceptable to him and therefore to his sons. This is true communion with the Holy Spirit, who sees the altar of God in everyone. And by bringing it to your appreciation, he calls upon you to love God and his creation. You can appreciate the sonship only as one. This is part of the law of creation, and therefore governs all thought. There's a lot in there, but it still said very little. Are you still on mute, Kuzume? Yes.
Okay. Well, we just said something so profound. No, our lesson today is I accept my part in God's plan for salvation. And it's not one that we immediately resonate with, but we did as we were told, as we do, and we sat to meditate this morning, and we repeated that. And it's one of those lessons where it says, you know, just you'll be told what to think, you'll be told what you know, what thoughts, so don't try to, anyway. So we sat there and we're just like, okay, I accept my part in God's plan for salvation. What is God's plan for salvation? It's like, well, it's to forgive the world, isn't it? Really, that's how we get. Forgiveness is the key to salvation. Forgiveness is the key to happiness. I can't remember the exact quotes, and so what this chapter was perfect for us. What we've just read. What happened was we were like, okay, so we don't right now have anybody in our life we need to forgive. And we thought about the world and the terrible things that are happening, which we really don't usually pay any attention to the news or even read it or hear it or anything. But at the moment, there's so many things happening that we cannot ignore. And so we thought about the Gaza, and we thought about mostly like, and the Ukraine, and we thought mostly about the soldiers, the people who were doing the killing, and really tried to hold them and send them love and forgiveness, and just hold them and welcome them into our heart as part of us, and just say you're forgiven, you're forgiven, you're forgiven, you're forgiven, over and over, because we think, well, yeah, people who are doing those terrible things must be suffering so much pain and guilt. We imagine they probably are so dissociated from all of that, they don't even realize the pain that they're in. But it was, what was really lovely is that, like, working this course and studying this and you know, understanding what is being told us, is that we believe that does make a difference now. You know, it's not just wishful thinking. It's not just, there's one mind here. So what happens in our mind can heal the world. I mean, that's the lesson we've been, my lesson yesterday was, you know, I am free to forgive, I am free to save the world. And it's like, yeah, so let's get on with that then. Because we really could do with saving right now. We always could, couldn't it? Yeah, that sat very well with what we've just read. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Kusume. I think that touches on something Pam and I were saying before we even started reading today. And we were talking about how the world is an illusion, and how, you know, being able to change our mind about something really changes the way we see the world. And then we came to the next conclusion, which was, oh yeah, and when we change our mind, the world actually does change, right? The world we see changes. So, and as we discussed earlier, things stop coming into our awareness that we need to learn from. Situations, relationships, circumstances stop coming because we've healed that part of the separation in our mind. And, you know, and it does really feel like that's where only true healing can occur, right? Is in our mind, because our mind is still in the kingdom, where all healing is.
Yeah, as long as we're seeing the problem out there as something separate from us, we can't heal it, we can't touch it.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that the world has to change, at least in my opinion. It's not really that the world does change, but our perception of it, the things we are choosing to hang on to or to focus on, have now healed / joined. Therefore, they're no longer something we are obsessing over or being challenged, torn with. We no longer see it as a problem because we have that experience that allows us to see it differently. So in fact, it's not the world that's changed, it's our perception of it. And that's the part that we were just reading in the course this morning, the definition of a miracle. And that's how that gets to be a miracle, is nothing changes and on the outside, but because our perception changes, the outside seems totally different because we are.
Yeah.
And so that's how you get to the space where there are no problems and there's no work to be done. There's no order of difficulty because that whole theory is inside of us.
That's true. And because that theory is inside of us and there is only one mind, therefore, I think it does change the experience from that perspective of the separated mind, even having the illusion, right? And I know I've experienced personally situations where I've had healing dreams, where when the relationship was healed in the dream, outwardly in this dream, the relationship is healed and nothing else was done except the healing in the dream. I also listened to this really interesting podcast not too long ago about this young man who was horribly abused as a child. I mean, I think he even said that it was a well media documented case of abuse where he was fed through a dog door. He was a young child outside in the rain and the elements, and his father actually went to jail for a long, long time. But he said he had a dream where this monster was chasing him and it became a lucid dream. And he was only like 5 years old when he had this dream. And he realized that the monster was his father. And actually, he didn't realize the monster was his father yet. The monster was chasing him and he stopped and he confronted the monster in his dream. And then the monster shrunk down into this tiny little like stuffed animal. And he realized that it just wanted love. It just wanted to be loved. So he hugged it and told it that he loved it. And then he realized it was his father. And the very next day, his father stopped abusing him and the police came and arrested him. So again, it goes back to, it is a dream, but the one mind is so connected to all of its separated parts that when the dream is healed within the one mind, I think it does have reaching effects within the separation that then kind of show up in interesting ways. Not that you expect that, but I think that's just kind of a happy coincidence when you see it. I don't even want to say coincidence because I don't think it's a coincidence, but I think it's a happy after effect that sometimes is perceivable and sometimes is not. You know, as they say, miracle is received and its effects are so far reaching, you may never see the effects of the miracle, right? You may never see it, but sometimes you do. And in those times, it is kind of thrilling to see how it kind of pans out within the dream of the separation, which again, just shows you that since there is change, it's still part of the illusion, which we know as Course in Miracles students. We're still talking about the illusion. We're still talking about the illusion changing because only illusions can change. But it's kind of fun and interesting to see that.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, we have to say that we really disagree with this idea that it's just our perception that changes. That is not what we read in this course. It says that that there is one mind and we are all part of that mind. And as we change, it touches every other mind. And we love the dream analogy because that makes so much sense to us. It's like we're having a dream right now, and because we have all of this misunderstanding, it's a dream of fear and a dream of pain. And as And like, as we change, as our mind changes, the rules that govern this dream change. And that's why there's no order of difficulty in miracles, because it's not real. So yeah, there's just one of us here. and, yeah. It also says very clearly we don't find the kingdom of heaven on our own. We've talked about this, haven't we? You know, we go hand in hand with every brother. We do it together or not at all. There's no such thing as like personal salvation. It doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Some dramatic examples of the outer changing as a result of a miracle is when Jesus healed the sick and raised the dead and all the other miracles. That did happen. It did change what appeared out there. I guess the reality is we're not bodies, and so we never could have been sick. And so there's a way of looking at it both ways. It appears to change, and then it really doesn't. And it is an inside job. But it's all happening to all of us at the same time.
Yeah. And as far as an inside job goes, yes, that we have to do. We have to initiate it, right? We can go with our brother. We can share that love and that extension with our brother, but it has to start somewhere, right? So, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. All right. Well, anybody have anything else they want to share? Okay, let's keep going. Get some more insight here. From vigilance, peace. Although you can love the sonship only as one, you can perceive it as fragmented. It is impossible, however, to see something in part of it that you will not attribute to all of it. That is why attack is never discrete, and why it must be relinquished entirely. If it is not relinquished entirely, it is not relinquished at all. Fear and love make or create, depending on whether the ego or the Holy Spirit begets or inspires them. But they will return to the mind of the thinker, and they will affect his total perception. That includes his concept of God, of his creations, and of his own. He will not appreciate any of them if he regards them fearfully. He will appreciate all of them if he regards them with love. The mind that accepts attack cannot love. That is because it believes it can destroy love and therefore does not understand what love is. If it does not understand what love is, it cannot perceive itself as loving. This loses the awareness of being, induces feelings of unreality, and results in utter confusion. Your thinking has done this because of its power. But your thinking can also save you from this because its power is not of your making. Your ability to direct your thinking as you choose is part of its power. If you do not believe you can do this, you have denied the power of your thought and thus rendered it powerless in your belief. The ingeniousness of the ego to preserve itself is enormous, but it stems from the very power of the mind the ego denies. This means that the ego attacks what is preserving it. which must result in extreme anxiety. That is why the ego never recognizes what it is doing. It is perfectly logical, but clearly insane. The ego draws upon the one source that is totally inimical to its existence for its existence. Fearful of perceiving the power of this source, it is forced to depreciate it. This threatens its own existence, a state which it finds intolerable. Remaining logical but still insane, the ego resolves this completely insane dilemma in a completely insane way. It does not perceive its existence as threatened by projecting the threat onto you and perceiving your being as non-existent. This ensures its continuance if you side with it by guaranteeing that you will not know your own safety. The ego cannot afford to know anything. Knowledge is total, and the ego does not believe in totality. This unbelief is its origin. And while the ego does not love you, it is faithful to its own antecedents, begetting as it was begotten. Mind always reproduces as it was produced. Produced by fear, the ego reproduces fear. This is its allegiance, and this allegiance makes it treacherous to love because you are love. Love is your power, which the ego must deny. It must also deny everything this power gives you because it gives you everything. No one who has everything wants the ego. Its own maker, then, does not want it. Rejection is therefore the only decision the ego could possibly encounter if the mind that made it knew itself. And if it recognized any part of the sonship, it would know itself. The ego, therefore, opposes all appreciation, all recognition, all sane perception, and all knowledge. It perceives their threat as total because it senses that all commitments the mind makes are total. Forced, therefore, to detach itself from you, it is willing to attach itself to anything else. But there is nothing else. The mind can, however, make up illusions, and if it does so, it will believe in them, because that is how it made them. The Holy Spirit undoes illusions without attacking them, because he cannot perceive them at all. They therefore do not exist for him. He resolves the apparent conflict they engender by perceiving conflict as meaningless. I've said before that the Holy Spirit perceives the conflict exactly as it is, and it is meaningless. The Holy Spirit does not want you to understand conflict. He wants you to realize that because conflict is meaningless, it is not understandable. As I have already said, understanding brings appreciation, and appreciation brings love. Nothing else can be understood, because nothing else is real, and therefore nothing else has meaning. If you will keep in mind what the Holy Spirit offers you, you cannot be vigilant for anything but God and his kingdom. The only reason you may find this hard to accept is because you may still think there is something else. Belief does not require vigilance unless it is conflicted. If it is, there are conflicting components within it that have led to a state of war, and vigilance has therefore become essential. Vigilance has no place in peace. It is necessary against beliefs that are not true and would never have been called upon by the Holy Spirit if you had not believed the untrue. When you believe something, you have made it true for you. When you believe what God does not know, your thought seems to contradict his. And this makes it appear as if you're attacking him. I have repeatedly emphasized that the ego does believe it can attack God and tries to persuade you that you have done this. If the mind cannot attack, the ego proceeds perfectly logically to the belief that you must be a body. By not seeing you as you are, it can see itself as it wants to be. Aware of its weakness, the ego wants your allegiance, but not as you really are. The ego therefore wants to engage your mind in its own delusional system, because otherwise the light of your understanding would dispel it. It wants no part of truth, because the ego itself is not true. If truth is total, the untrue cannot exist. Commitment to either must be total. They cannot coexist in your mind without splitting it. If they cannot coexist in peace, and if you want peace, you must give up the idea of conflict entirely and for all time. This requires vigilance only as long as you do not recognize what is true. While you believe that two totally contradictory thought systems share truth, your need for vigilance is apparent. Your mind is dividing its allegiance between two kingdoms, and you are totally committed to neither. Your identification with the kingdom is totally beyond question, except by you, when you are thinking insanely. What you are is not established by your perception and is not influenced by it at all. Perceived problems in identification at any level are not problems of fact. They are problems of understanding, since their presence implies a belief that what you are is up to you to decide. The ego believes this totally, being fully committed to it. It is not true. The ego, therefore, is totally committed to untruth, perceiving in total contradiction to the Holy Spirit and to the knowledge of God. You can be perceived with meaning only by the Holy Spirit, because your being is the knowledge of God. Any belief you accept apart from this will obscure God's voice in you and will therefore obscure God to you. Unless you perceive his creation truly, you cannot know the Creator, since God and his creation are not separate. The oneness of the Creator and the creation is your wholeness, your sanity, and your limitless power. This limitless power is God's gift to you because it is what you are. If you dissociate your mind from it, you're perceiving the most powerful force in the universe as if it were weak, because you do not believe you are part of it. Perceived without your part in it, God's creation is seen as weak, and those who see themselves as weakened do attack. The attack must be blind, however, because there's nothing to attack. Therefore, they make up images, perceive them as unworthy, and attack them for their unworthiness. That is all the world of the ego is. Nothing. It has no meaning. It does not exist. Do not try to understand it, because if you do, you are believing that it can be understood and is therefore capable of being appreciated and loved. That would justify its existence, which cannot be justified. You cannot make the meaningless meaningful. This can only be an insane attempt. Allowing insanity to enter your mind means that you have not judged sanity as wholly desirable. If you want something else, you will make something else. But because it is something else, it will attack your thought system and divide your allegiance. You cannot create in this divided state, and you must be vigilant against this divided state, because only peace can be extended. Your divided mind is blocking the extension of the kingdom. And its extension is your joy. If you do not extend the kingdom, you're not thinking with your creator and creating as he created. In this depressing state, the Holy Spirit reminds you gently that you are sad because you are not fulfilling your function as co-creator with God and are therefore depriving yourself of joy. This is not God's choice, but yours. If your mind could be out of accord with God's, you would be willing without meaning. Yet because God's will is unchangeable, no conflict of will is possible. This is the Holy Spirit's perfectly consistent teaching. Creation, not separation, is your will because it is God's, and nothing that opposes this means anything at all. Being a perfect accomplishment, the sonship can only accomplish perfectly, extending the joy in which it was created and identifying itself with both its creator and its creations, knowing they are one. Well, that was an interesting read.
There was a lot in there, wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
We liked 11, the whole of 11, paragraph 11, that spoke to us today. Yeah, that is all the world of the ego is. Nothing. It has no meaning. It does not exist. Do not try to understand it.
Right.
We love that. I mean, that is so contrary to the way that we've lived our whole life, like thinking that we have to figure things out and understand things, and all these things are the thoughts of the ego. They're all things like about, yeah, all details about the dream and the relationships and the people,
Right.
the other egos and what they're up to and what we're up to, and how we're interacting and all of that. And just to be able to say, okay, oh, that's meaningless. There's no point in even thinking about it, any of it. It's
right.
It's so revolutionary and difficult, because it's like, yeah, those thoughts will just will come back and be like, yeah, but you know, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. I'm not going to do anything about that.
Nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that goes back to what Mary was saying earlier, is that it has nothing to do with any of the relationships, you know, that it's just your thoughts and being either vigilant for God and his kingdom or vigilant for the ego. There is no in between. So, you know, certainly what Mary was saying had a lot of validity to it as well. I was just finished watching, is it called Planet Earth? The one that's narrated by Morgan Freeman. Have any of you watched that? It's so interesting. And it goes into like the whole planet Earth and how it was just like goes back to the beginning, right? And that there were 5 extinction events, 5 separate extinction events. And that each time there was an extinction event, a new species was born and prevailed. And it goes, and I was thinking about that when we were reading this, because sure, we can say I'm not my body, right? But thinking about, as a human being, we are part of a species of planet Earth, right? And we see each other here on the screen. We all look like human beings, right? Like, we certainly don't look like, you know, animals or reptiles or, right, you know, so it's like we somehow have this agreement that we are human beings, which again is a thought of the ego, right? But let's just say hypothetically, looks like another extinction event is likely to occur because the planet is, going through significant changes that it's never gone through before because of human beings being on the planet. Let's just say hypothetically there's another extinction event, right? And then a new species is born, right? Like, then what do we appear as in this separated state of illusion, right? Which is so interesting when we think about it, because here we are thinking that we're these bodies that live on planet Earth, and it's all part of the illusion, right? I mean, it's just kind of mind-blowing when you think of it in terms of that versus just be vigilant for God and his kingdom, because all of this is an illusion. Yeah.
That's a really good place to finish. Thank you, Terry.
I don't know if it's good or not. It just made people go, oh.
I'm just wondering if I was ever a dinosaur.
I mean, we're all of it,
Yeah.
right? We must be the plants and the sun and the moon and the stars. We're all of it.
But was I ever identifying as a dinosaur?
Right?
Never mind.
No, but it's so interesting when you think of it that way, because the fact that we're even having this conversation as a human being and thinking about our true nature, like, did that just start with us, with humans? Like, when did the separated mind of God start questioning its reality? Maybe we never questioned our reality before we were able to think as human beings, because we never bothered to ask the question, who am I? I don't know. Interesting, right? Anyway, anybody have any thoughts now that I kind of threw that in the mix? Always wonderful to see all of you. Thank you so much for participating. And I want to thank Mary, even though it looks like she wasn't able to stay on the whole time. But it's always great to be with all of you and have these wonderful, thought-provoking discussions.
Thanks, everyone. We gotta go.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much. We'll
Good
see you
to see
next week.
Thank you.
It.
Bye.